Groovy, groovy, groovy.
Caffeine is important. Mhm. All right. Yeah, he's finding a cable for me. My microphone. Quit taking it apart. Twice. Find my adapters. He's, yep.
You getting her worked out?
Yeah, I've got it figured out.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and go then.
All
Leave
right,
you
thanks,
guys to
Bill.
it.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, man. We'll see you.
Okay, take care.
Have a good one, Joe.
Yep. See you next week. Down. Input. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear yourself?
Yeah, I can hear
I'm
myself.
not quite sure.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear yourself? Can you hear yourself when you talk from my stuff?
No, no.
Okay. Jackie, can you say something real quick?
Hello?
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. My name's Majid. One of Joe's podcasting friends.
One of the reprobates.
Well, I did think about calling myself a reprobate, but I'm supposed to be a medical professional at the same time.
Now recording.
Okay, so I've got Craig to start recording as well then. I can't hear you anymore, Dojo. Have you muted? No, can't hear you.
Hello, Moto.
Yes, I can. I heard that. Yes. Oh, I am actually hearing my echo
you
on the
can
other
hear
side.
it now. You're also hearing your other side.
Yeah.
Echo on the-
Now I can't hear you. Nope.
Anything?
Yes, I can hear you
You should
there.
be able to hear me now.
I got you there.
Okay. It's actually an issue with Discord.
Is it Discord that's the problem? Okay.
Yeah, it was Discord. So I forced it to listen to the mic I'm telling you to listen to.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, hi Jackie. My name's Majid. I'm one of Joe's mates, as it were, podcasts, and one of my podcasts that I do is called the Atypical Doctor podcast, where I basically talk to interesting people. It's a bit,
Yes.
I like to think of myself as not the typical brown doctor. Even though yes, I am a doctor and anesthesiologist, I've got interests in other things. Obviously, I'm doing the Linux podcasts with Joe, but other things as well. And so I was really interested to speak to both of you because, I mean, I suppose it's been interesting in American politics, shall we say, for the last couple of months.
It feels like dog years, man. We call it what it is.
I mean, it's not even hit 100 days yet, has it?
Nope, but it feels like it's been years.
Yeah, and at the same time, I always found it interesting that both of you are involved in the Democratic Party, and you're from Texas, which is not the most. You want to put those things together, put it that way.
Well, that's where you're kind of the Democratic Party used to actually be the ruling party in Texas.
Yeah.
But it has moved away from the Southern KKK style Democrat, and they've changed sides.
Yeah, because they used to be the Dixiecrats. That's what they used to be called, wasn't it? Am I right? In the Jim Crow laws and all that sort of stuff. Cool. All right, so I'll do just a quick introduction, just to start, and then if you guys could then introduce yourselves, and then I'll talk, and hopefully the questions will be all right, and you don't mind answering them. If you don't want to answer anything, that's absolutely fine as well.
We do need to let you know that we are under severe weather watch.
Okay.
And if the sirens go off, we're going to have to cut.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, thank you.
I mean, that's a best excuse I'll ever hear. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a severe weather warning. I've got to go. Honestly. Okay.
Well, half the time it goes off for hail, high winds of 60 miles an hour, or tornado sighting.
Oh, we don't get any of that here. I mean, I suppose we don't get as much extreme weather, but yeah. Okay. Welcome to the Atypical Doctor podcast. This is season 2, episode 2. Now, people who actually listen to my podcast may know that I actually spoke politics in season 1. That was with Rashad Ali, who seemed to have quite a few links in the Labour Party that I was not aware of. That was almost 5 years ago, and they say a week is a long time in politics. Nowadays, it seems even more so. And so I'm delighted to have on the show today a friend of mine, Joe Boylan, and his better half, Jackie, to try and discuss a little bit about the political situation in America at this moment in time. So, yes, if you could just kind of give us a quick introduction of where you are politically and what you do.
Go ahead, Jackie.
I'm a native Texan.
Mm-hmm.
I was born here, raised here, but I'm a West Texan. So I grew up in West Texas, El Paso. And I am technically a Democrat. And I was raised with a very blue county. And now we've moved to North Dallas County, that is the reddest county in the state of Texas.
Okay. So are you involved in the local party? Or councils or things like that, or are you a party member? How does it work?
We're both. Well, I'm a party member, and I do vote in the primaries, and I do stuff with the local Democratic groups.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, there's a lot of women's groups that do stuff.
We were both involved with the local area Democratic group, but it seems like that group is going to be dissolved here shortly.
Okay.
But yeah, because of some interesting issues there that probably are best not gotten into.
Okay. Who'd have thunk it? Politicians have politics.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of my views are probably a little bit more libertarian leaning, but the libertarians here are crazy. And the Republicans decided that I was a Democrat, so I just rolled with it.
Okay. So you've already kind of alluded to my first question, I suppose, which would be, for the people who are outside America, Texas is the reddest of red states. I know historically the Democratic Party was big in the South, but that was a lot of it prior to the Civil Rights Movement. And it was a different Democrat Party. So how come you guys are Dems in, as you say, the reddest county of one of the reddest states?
Well, Republicans have been in power in Texas since George Bush Jr. And they have the trifecta. They have the governor, they have the House, the legislative, and they have the judicial. So that kind of tells you how long they've been here, and what you can kind of look at how Texas is run is what everybody wants America to run like.
So you're meaning that it's a model for the federal government that they're trying to go for. Okay. So just expand a little bit on that for our people who aren't as au fait with American politics.
The trifecta is known where you have the three branches of government.
Mm-hmm.
In Texas, we vote for our Supreme Court. We also vote for our governor and our legislative.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republican Party has had the majority, a heavy supermajority where they can override any other voices for about 25, 30 years.
Okay. So before that, was it a swing state, or was it, as you're saying, very much Dixiecrat, old style Democrat, or?
It was kind of a swing state through the 80s and the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more of the rise of the Reagan and Nixon coalition changed how Texas was run, and they really became a political power.
Okay.
And Nixon started it and Reagan pushed it is they've gone through the evangelical and the Christianity.
Okay.
To where they tied your identity to you're a God-fearing person, so you're the right type of American.
Okay.
And Texas has a lot of mega churches, so you're looking at 5,000 people congregations.
Wow. So again, the question comes, how come you're Democrat?
Because when you talk to the Republicans around here, you realize that they don't know what the hell they're talking about, and they don't give a crap about anybody other than themselves.
I grew up in El Paso, which is a strong Democrat stronghold in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, some of Texas doesn't even want to acknowledge it. They try to say it's part of New Mexico.
Okay.
It was faster for me to go to Old Mexico, the country, and I could go to New Mexico and El Paso. It's about a 10-minute drive either way.
Okay. So.
And that area is very strong, culturally wise, also Catholic.
Okay.
Hispanic Catholic. And we believe in, yes, you can be conservative, but it's for the family. Your tradition is in the family can be conservative, but you are very social net heavy, because everybody has problems and everybody needs a hands up sometime.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have seen Beto O'Rourke.
No.
In any of your political, he ran for governor of Texas. He's kind of the moderate from where I'm from. He's from El Paso, Texas.
Okay. So does it feel quite lonely being a Democrat in Texas at the minute?
Well, we're kind of lucky in that, we're looped in with the rest of not just the Democrats, but also a bunch of the libertarians, and then also the less crazy Republicans.
Yeah, the ones that have left the Republican Party, we kind of hang out with them too. They just don't like where it's going.
Like when we really got tied into all the different groups when Jackie asked me to run for school board, and that's when everybody decided that I was a Democrat because I wasn't a Republican. So meeting all of the different groups and shaking hands with everybody and just getting to be known and know people. So we're not really lonely in that regard.
But I think, is there not a feeling at the moment with the way that the trajectory that America is going in general, that, you sometimes feel like, you're the voice in the wilderness trying to stop people jumping over the cliff?
Absolutely. I mean, we both have relatives that are diehard Republican Trump, MAGA, Trump is greater than God type of people in our families. And it's, we talk to them and they're happier than pigs in slop that all of this is going on, that someone is taking a chainsaw to our government without any oversight, or
hurting people.
and hurting people, firing people randomly because, the government doesn't need to be spending money on them. And not realizing that the people that are being fired are the ones that are actually, generating the income for the government and making the government run the way that it's supposed to. Like IRS auditors going after, that make billions and billions of dollars. But yeah, and it does feel like the US government has become very antithetical to anything that we hold to be true. So we actually have seriously considered just disappearing, going to another country, going and living with Majid.
We have a lot of fear because of how bad things are getting and how fast.
Yeah.
And we have 3 kids that we have to protect that are, 2 of them are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And all of our kids are what they call special education. They receive services when they were in public education to help them come over their disabilities. My eldest and my youngest are in the dyslexia umbrella. And they need supports to be able, they can do the work. They just need it offered in a different way. So my daughter is very severe dyslexic, and she needs, if you're going to give her stuff, you need to give it to her in an audio format.
Yeah.
You want her to get it done, just do that. And my son is dysgraphic. Asking him to write something for you might take him hours, but if you give him a keyboard or speech to text, he can keep up with the class load. He just needs an alternative way to provide it for him. And my middle daughter is what they call medical compromised. She's immune compromised, and she's got some unusual medical. So when she's sick, and she needs a chance to be able to make up work and not be punished for it. It's the same for the 504s also will protect her at work. It shows that this is a case that she has a disability. It just, when she's sick for the flu, some people are out for 2 or 3 days. She's out for about 2 weeks.
Yeah. So there's obviously the worry that a lot of the support that did come from government is now being taken away.
Trump got rid of the OCR for Office of Civil Rights for people with disabilities in the Department of Education.
I mean, I just find,
So
I
before-
mean, I just find this, some of that stuff is just like, I just like, for example, am I right in saying that he got rid of the federal education board?
He's working on that.
He's working on it.
He couldn't just outright get rid of it. He put people into place that are supposed to be sunsetting it and getting rid of it and moving it to other areas. But essentially what it means is there would be no Department of Education in the government, and the one that is there now is basically defunct.
And it's defunded, and they've fired so many people that are the federal government is slow to move when there's an issue, usually. But when it moves, it's a very heavy sledgehammer. It just takes time to get it moving. But now he's taken out all of the hammers that could stop people from being the worst that they could be.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like they don't want people to actually be educated, and it's kind of disturbing. Yes, okay, it takes a little bit of extra work to teach someone that has ADHD. So does that mean you just leave them by the wayside, train the norm, and get rid of everybody else? No, I mean, seriously, what the hell is wrong with wanting the people around you to be slightly more intelligent?
So, I remember around the time of the election when me and you, Joe, were on Mincast, and I said to you once, I don't know if it was actually on the air or not, but I said, look, is it really going to be that bad? I mean, is it really? I mean, surely there's going to be, a lot of it is bluster, and a lot of this is, politics and this, that. And I remember you saying, no, it will be that bad, and it will get bad very quickly. And I've got to be honest, you're 100% right. At least from where I'm sitting here in the UK, it's just ridiculous, to the extent now that it's having an effect on politics over here. So, for example, the Reform Party in the UK is this kind of right wing, righter than the Conservative Party, led by Farage, who always thought to be very close to Trump. And, he was always kind of seen, trying to get that kind of white working class vote. And it looks like he was getting somewhere with it as well, even though they didn't get that many MPs in the last election. They had a reasonable vote share.
Thank you. I was watching y'all's voting. I was like, oh, please, don't let it go too far.
Yeah. No, I mean, as I said, but to be honest, that's more of a... I've got my own issues with our electoral system, to be honest, because the fact that he got the same percentage of votes as the Liberal Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats got 70 seats and he got 4, does make me think that there's some kind of democratic deficit in the structure. But we'll get to that, but that's a separate issue entirely. But now, because of his perceived closeness to Trump, it's now causing him problems. We've got our own local council elections coming up in the next couple of months. Reform were due to be doing brilliantly in those, picking up the people who can't vote Labour but can't vote for the Conservatives because for 14 years they trashed the country. And now they're taking second thoughts because we don't want to be like what's happening over there. So I suppose the question comes, and I suppose this is a really big question, and I could probably talk about it for a long time, but how did we end up here? How did we end up, in this situation where everything that we did, that sensible people didn't want to happen, is happening?
Well, I think I said something to you in a chat, in a private chat, about how we got here, and because I was really surprised that he got as much vote as he did, and I think my answer was something along the lines that people were looking for immediate action as opposed to long-term solutions.
A lot of people are hurting, and I'm not just... some of our Trump issues is there's still a lot of racism. And a lot of people think that they're being replaced by people that are immigrant, and he picked up on that.
The kick-down mentality.
And it's not really... they voted against themselves because Trump doesn't care about them. The ruling party, the GOP, the Grand Old Party, Republicans, they'd say one thing, but they mean another. And they've told everybody that to be patriotic, the only way you can be patriotic for our country is you have to be like them. They just don't tell them what them is. They leave it open for their interpretation, and they hit the immigration issue a lot because everybody thinks that somebody else is trying to replace them.
I mean, the one interesting thing I found about America, I suppose, as opposed to the UK, when we complained about immigration, we were complaining about legal immigration. Yeah, we were talking about people who are coming from the European Union. That's what led to Brexit. All these foreigners coming over. They were coming completely legally. They were allowed to. It was the design of the European Union for free movement of capital, free movement of people, and the other two freedoms, which I can't remember now. But but in America, am I right in saying that most immigration is actually illegal? And is that part of the problem?
There's two ways about it. There's two things about it. A lot of people who become illegal came here properly.
Okay.
They've come in through airports, through ships. Now, they want to pick on the people that are coming through Mexico, trying to escape a lot of the issues that the United States created and is exacerbated in South America. But the other thing is our country needs them. Our economy is based on having cheap labor, and they don't... They want to say that they can keep them, but at the same time, they don't want to. And so it's been a big issue for our people that have come here illegally. They cross the border. trying to get through. It can take you 10, 12 years to get through the court system to become naturalized.
Okay.
And then you have other people that have stayed over on their visas and they just stay. And then they try. It comes down to what kind of money you have can help move you through our system faster. It's like Elon Musk overstayed a visa and he cheated on his visa, but now he's a naturalized citizen.
So I think you've
Okay,
you've actually got an interesting point about the fact that a lot of these kind of nativists and populist groups forget that the country, whichever country it is, needs immigration to function. And we're having this problem in the UK at the minute that the biggest problem in any sector is lack of people. Why are school sizes so big? There's not enough teachers. Why is the waits in the ED department or in outpatient so high? Because there's not enough doctors. There's not enough nurses. We want to improve our service. We haven't got the people to do it. A lot of people who did that, whether it was the unskilled, the semi-skilled, all the way up to the professionals. I mean, my father was a doctor. He came to this country. He came as a professional. And the other thing is, I mean, I don't know how true this is in America. There's been a real collapse in birth rates all over Europe. Lots of places,
Everywhere.
yeah, lots of places are below the 2.1, which is the replacement rate. And so you need these people to do the work. And
you need a growing population in order to grow an economy. That's
I mean, it's
that's worldwide.
And and the thing about you're saying about a lot of the people who are coming over to America are coming because of the American foreign policy. A lot of the illegal immigrants into the UK and into Europe are fleeing Syria and all the other kind of Middle East morasses, messes, which the British did have a hand in some way or the other, unfortunately. Do you know what I mean? And so it gets me as being very disingenuous of like, oh, we will cause you problems, but don't come here and try and help us because, you would rather cut your nose to spite your face.
Yeah. Well, on the whole illegal immigration thing, yes, there are a lot of illegal immigrants. There is a lot more legal immigration to the U.S., but let's take a look at the whole illegal immigrants thing for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
This country actually thrives on illegal immigration.
Especially for our agriculture.
Especially for our agriculture.
So, like right now, we have farms in Louisiana that are desperate to hire people, and they're paying about £8 an hour. But it's not enough to survive without having multiple people working. And they're 6 days a week and they're 12-hour days. And they can't get enough people to work.
Yeah, you can't get an American to work at those rates and those conditions because that's technically not enough for...
That's poverty wages.
Yeah, one person to live on unless there's a family of people all doing the work.
We had the same thing over the last couple of years. Fruit was going unpicked and rotten in fields because the cheap labor that used to come legally from Europe, so from Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, whatever, now didn't come. And yes, local British people.
So we had legal immigration for agriculture too, but Trump has gotten rid of a lot of that ability. Where they would come, but they would only come for the seasons. And then they would go back. And he's made it where they can't even come in.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the same problem happening all over the country in the agricultural department because they can't get enough people.
And I can't explain to some people how terrifying it is that they can just deport people without any kind of due process. They can arrest, detain, and do whatever the hell they want to people without any kind of due process, which, okay, these people, they're gang members, blah, blah, blah. You don't know that they're gang members until after they've had their due process. You can't prove anything until they've gone through it. So if an American gets arrested, but they're not given any due process, how do they prove that they're an American and get due process?
Well, that's the other thing. In our country, for immigrants, if you are here legally, you have the same rights to our court system and our naturalization, our liberties, we call them the Constitution, if you are here legally. And they're basically, everybody's been having their rights just taken away.
There's a
And we've
scene.
had even America.
There's a scene from one of the Star Wars films in which Chancellor Palpatine is given executive powers, and somebody makes the remark, "This is how democracy dies," with thunderous applause. It does kind of seem that a lot of the aspects that make America and a lot of other Western countries so successful, in the sense of rule of law, due process, all of that, are being gotten rid of, and people are cheering it. They're happy for it to go. I mean, again, how did this happen?
They're happy because they feel like the American dream is you can come in and you can become a millionaire, right? That's our mythology. We've beat it down. It's in our stories. It's in our tall tales. Everybody can, but it's a lot harder than a lot of people realize. And because they're not in that special, I made a millionaire because I'm an American, they feel like they've been beat down by somebody else who else is stealing their chance for glory.
Yeah, and the whole thing is that you actually could at one time in America switch classes, move up classes, but that was a very specific time, 50s through 70s, I believe.
No, 50s through 60s.
And that was based on the taxation of the rich, essentially. And then we kind of switched to this trickle-down economics idea during Reaganomics.
Nixon started it.
Reagan continued it.
Yeah. Did I send you that video of the guy? Oh, I can't remember his name now. Who actually said that about how between the Second World War and Nixon, the American growth was unprecedented. It was the most successful society in history, and Nixon willingly torpedoed it, and people liked it.
Yeah.
Well, that's again, it comes to the haves and the have-nots.
Well,
they've been kind of, they started using religion at that time with Nixon and Reagan to help prove that they're supposed to be the haves, and because they do not have it, they're using the gospel and the church and the Bible to try to say, well, this is because of this, and they started changing the whole idea of what Jesus really was.
Which is also an interesting point that I always find, because in the UK, the church and mainstream Christian denominations are very much left of centre. The Labour Party, owes a lot to the Methodist churches of the 19th century, and the kind of social welfare programs that they did. How is it so different? How is it so different over there?
Well, okay, so you're saying our Republicans are like your most ultra-conservative party.
Mm-hmm.
And our Democrats are more of your middle centrist. If that kind of helps explain some of how this is. And a lot of our communities were built with their churches.
Mm-hmm.
There's not things to do as a community unless you were part of a church. So it's been kind of browbeat that you gave away your Sundays for church all your life.
But it's because they choose to ignore the parts of the Bible that, don't enrich them.
They've gotten to where they tell people through the churches that Jesus is like them. He's white. He believes in patriotism. He doesn't help the poor. He doesn't. I'm just saying Jesus because a good chunk of them are Christians that believe in Jesus. And they outnumber everybody else. And it's gotten away from the teachings of the Bible.
I mean, the meek shall inherit the earth. I mean, I'm a Muslim and I know that quote from Jesus, They
don't believe that. It will be the patriot. It will be the one that acts like the Jesus they believe him to be.
Well, Jesus espoused, helping your neighbor, loving your neighbor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't convince a Republican of that. It doesn't matter that the Bible said that. That's not what Jesus meant. Jesus meant we protect our own, screw everybody else.
Yeah, there was an interesting Twitter spat between Vance and one of our politicians, Rory Stewart, who is a conservative actually, he's also a Christian, and he was saying something about love thy neighbor, and then JD Vance said something about order amoris or something like this, some kind of deep theological issue, and it turned into a whole argument where basically, you know, it was just one of the most surreal things actually that I'd ever seen. You know, if I find it, I'll send it to Joe. It was very weird.
But they've used the church because we are so ingrained with it, because it's usually the only community for an area was built around it, to change people. And they quit teaching the Bible and they preach from the pulpit to be like them.
So it seems that,
and a lot of our institutionalists are not following the laws of Christianity, but they make millions of dollars. Pastors rob. The tithe is no longer for the church, it's for the preacher.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe some of the preachers that run the mega churches or the televangelists, and just how bloody rich they are. Or
where you sit in the church and how you're able to hear, or if you are given blessings, it depends on how much you're donating. You no longer can just walk into the church and sit somewhere. You now have to, you pay to play, even in our Christianity now. And it's been just doubled down since Nixon.
So were there any specific policies that Nixon did then that you think has led to where we are now?
It wasn't the policies, it was the change of how the GOP ran. They got rid of they wanted to get rid of the Catholic vote, because Catholics are very liberal.
Okay, interesting.
And wasn't it also the program where they got rid of the 95% tax for all the money that you make over $400,000?
Yes.
In a year?
Okay.
So it used to be that Americans that made over $400,000, every dollar that they made over $400,000 was taxed at 95%. And that funded a lot of your government. And then they took that away and kind of spread the tax burden, well, I'd say more equally, but more disproportionately across the entire population. And things have been kind of downhill since then.
Okay.
It came down to, they were really they wanted to break the idea of social services, social nets. The churches provided some, but at the time of Nixon, a lot of it was provided by the federal government. The changes into the civil rights, the paying for helping people rise up to become middle class. The student loans were at a fair rate. Colleges were at a fair rate. Education was valued. And at about the time Nixon started it, but it was just right before his impeachment. Well, before he got impeached. And Reagan's GOP really took it to the next level. And they changed how Republicans view things.
So a lot of the things that you've mentioned make me really make me understand about how polarized American society is, in a way that I don't think, at least we are in the UK. You know, it is not inconceivable for someone who voted Conservative to vote Labour in the next election, for example, or someone who is Labour to vote Lib Dem, or someone who's was Labour to vote Reform. There's a lot more movement in that sense. I mean, one argument would be that really everybody is a flavour of centre, really, in the UK, which means that anybody that's a bit on the edge, it gets disproportionately more part of the vote. But that's a separate thing. But America, from what you're saying, sounds very, very polarized.
Two-party system has taken over, and it really should not be a two-party system. Now, there are some times where, a Republican might vote for a Democrat, as in the guy that's running up on the Republican ticket is completely insane. But it's not enough generally, because we both know some Republicans that just basically have it automated to vote Republican across the board.
It's kind of like watching two football leagues, Manchester United and Arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
They can be that crazy, and they will only identify with that party. And they will never, as long as you say you're part of that group, you will forever walk around with it, and you will wear that pride, no matter what.
And
It doesn't matter how bad of a season it is, you're automatically in this club for life.
And much like Manchester United, the people are completely overpaid in the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, same with Arsenal. And look, man, Manchester United, I've been a Manchester United fan for a very long time. It's been a very depressing season this season.
14th.
Yes, I know, 14th. It's the lowest we've ever been in the history of the Premier League. But anyway.
The thing that makes us different is we do study. We do read. We do a lot more investigation into what we think or how to think. And we do a lot of international. That's a big difference between a Democrat and a Republican, is where our sources are, where we get information.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats have a very broad range that they will go look for information, and they don't just accept it's always MSNBC or it's only NBC or ABC. Most liberals who consider themselves Democrats will start reading from a lot of different publications to try to find where the middle ground is.
Mm-hmm.
And your Republicans only have about 3 sources, and that's all. They refuse to accept any other fact that doesn't come from their 3 sources, which is Trump, his Truth Social, Fox News, and ONA, One American Network. And they will straight up tell their base what they want them to think. And they're okay with that.
So, the question then comes, how does America get itself out of this hole? If it's so polarized that there's no middle ground swing voter-y type of demographic that you can go for. Tony Blair, for example, very famously, when he got his landslide victories in the 90s for the Labour Party, famously went after what they used to call the Mondeo man, the swing voter guy who was working class but had kind of done well for himself. He was now getting a good job and this, that, and might have voted Conservative, but he managed to convince that person to vote for Labour. And that's how they got their massive majorities on 35% of the vote. So, you're kind of saying that doesn't exist in America.
What it would take for our country to change is, one, we need to have our Supreme Court be back to a middle ground. That would help. Our Supreme Court right now is 6-3. There's 9 justices, and 6 of them are hardcore conservative. 3 of them are liberal. And Trump, that was some whole shenanigans and bullshit by McConnell and Trump that got him to get 3 picks. We need our court to go back to being a middle ground, and the only way for that to happen would be we need a Congress. I'm sorry to say this, but we'd have to get a trifecta.
Whoa.
Because we need the Congress not to fight us and allow a president. Our Supreme Court can be expanded and contracted very easily by a president. But we should be able to we'd have to move to a 13 instead of 9. And you would have to have probably somebody who puts either moderates or liberals on our Supreme Court. And you would have to have a Congress that would okay this by they give consent. They check the person if they agree with them or if they think they can be a fair judge.
Okay. I'm going to say that in the short term, and by short term, I mean 2026, you should see a lot more Democrats getting elected, because that's what normally happens. So long as the current people in power don't restrict our ability to vote, which they've already begun to do, like heavily, restricting normal people's ability to vote. But if that does not succeed completely, then hopefully we will see a lot more Democrats in the House and the Senate. which will then be able to curtail the power of the president. We're supposed to have this form of checks and balances so you don't end up a dictator on the throne.
And Congress is supposed to be in charge of the purse, not Trump.
Which they're already pushing back on a little bit.
Mainly about the tariffs because they're starting to catch him.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is we as Democrats, we prefer more of a middle ground because it means that we have a middle ground government. I'm okay with there being Republicans. I don't want an all Democratic Congress. I don't want an all Democratic House. And I don't want an all Democrat Supreme Court. But because I believe that people need to have that middle ground. There should be both sides should be able to hear, but we should find something that works for both of us. If everybody's unhappy, then we're usually in a good spot.
But the problem is when you have one side willing to, go to the middle ground and then one side that's absolutely not, it changes where that middle ground is.
Yeah, the Overton window, as they call it.
Yeah. So.
But that's going to change, hopefully. If right now we have in Congress, they're trying to pass what's called the SAVE Act.
I thought they already did.
And it got through the House.
Okay.
It got through Congress completely.
Well, hopefully it don't.
Hopefully it doesn't. But the SAVE Act basically makes it how you have to prove you are an actual natural citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. We all agree that if you're going to vote, you should be a natural citizen. Naturalized or born here. But to do that, they've changed the paperwork. And most Americans, only about 15% of Americans actually own a passport.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have a driver's license or an ID, your birth certificate, and your Social Security has to have all the same name. And the problem is, in America, a lot of women don't ever change all the paperwork because it's very expensive to do so, and you have to go through the courts.
Well, you can't really change your birth certificate anyway.
You can't. And
No.
so you have a choice of expensive route of change all the paperwork through the court, which can take years, or get a passport, which is still about $800.
But what this does is it makes it so that any woman that gets married and changes her last name to her husband's name can no longer vote without throwing a whole lot of money at the problem, a whole lot of money and time. So you have a quarter of your population, probably more like what?
40.
Almost 40% of the population that is completely disenfranchised from voting.
Yeah.
And women tend to vote more Democratic than men.
Okay, so a lot of the solutions that you've mentioned are kind of big picture solutions, changing the Supreme Court, having more Democrats in the House, that sort of thing. What about the battle for ideas amongst the voters, amongst the electorate? How do you shift this Overton window, which has gone so far to the right, back towards something which is, more center ground and more sensible?
It's going to take something so catastrophic to just have people wake up and make the changes. And the problem is everybody will suffer until that chaos happens and affects more people.
Yeah, because, your average person in America isn't paying enough attention or seeing enough to realize how much of our soft power, as it were, that we're just handing away. And
100%.
how much of our alliances that we're just getting rid of are yes, we have a lot of military power because we spend more militarily than any other country. But if we don't have alliances, then what's the point of having all of that military power? You can't use it to make more power. But
just locally, it's going to take. I personally believe it will be an education, and it have to be something that makes everybody upset.
When we actually see a price shift locally to the point where people aren't able to live, which I thought would already have happened by now, I'll be honest. But when we actually see that affecting more people, not just the farmers that it's currently affecting, and, well, more of the populace, I think we will see a change because gas prices haven't gone up the way anybody expected they would. Your grocery prices have had a small increase, but not enough that people are actually hurting from it yet.
That's in our area. Now, remember, we are kind of in a larger, we're an affluent area, and we have a larger distribution area. So our area hasn't been hit as hard as some of the other areas in the country.
So one of the things that you find that people on the other side, shall we say, throw towards Democrats or anybody who is liberal or basically who doesn't agree with them, is that these are all leftists, they're all cultural Marxists, they're all in the pay of the Chinese government or something or the other. They're all crazy transgendery type people. How do you push back against that?
You can try to explain to people that, your transgenders are actually less than 1% of the population.
0.01%.
And they're not really having any impact. The only thing is that people are screaming loudly about them that you notice it.
Mm-hmm.
They want to say, oh, we don't want them in our bathrooms, but you can say things like, well, I don't think whether or not someone's transgender is going to stop someone that wants to do something horrible to someone else from going into whatever bathroom they want to do it.
But just in general, they like to label us because they're happy with the labels. If they have something to yell about and be mad about, they're happier. It's kind of really bad, but Republican psychology is like they're more doomsday and everything's bad. So it's as long as you are what they consider bad, they're happy. If they can make your life difficult, that makes them even happier, which is really, if you even look at the psychological studies between what's considered liberal and what is considered conservative in the United States, it's how we view life. A lot of Democrats and liberals are very optimistic that life can change. But a lot of your Republicans are very stuck in it's always bad. You can look at a lot more. These are all studies you can look at. You look at your Democrats, they're still reading books. Most Republicans quit reading once they got out of education.
I don't think that answered this question.
I know, but I'm just saying, you just have to be, you realize that there's that fight that there's worth fighting for. And a lot of them just don't want to because they don't want to accept anything but what the facts that they know by.
You can't convince the convinced.
Okay, but how do you convince the people in between? Because there has to be a proportion of people, for example, that voted Trump this time that wouldn't have voted,
The only thing that
before.
will wake them up is their own choice. And it's what we call the FOFA, or FAFO movement. They want to fuck around, they're going to find out. Because that is the only thing that they're willing to, is when it happens to them personally, is the only time that they're willing to start listening.
When they start losing rights, when they start losing money, when they start going hungry, and actually believe that it's the policies of the person in power that's causing it, as opposed to, him blaming the people that came before him.
Or somebody else. He always has to have a victim, or it's a victim mentality. And until they realize they are no longer a victim, they have power to take care of things, they're not going to do it. And you can spend your life fighting with them, and they will be physical, and they will threaten you. They will trash your house. They will trash your car. They will threaten your kids.
Okay, so
you just have to find that happy. What are you willing to fight for?
Mm-hmm.
And what are you willing to walk away from and just let them suffer? I don't like watching people that I know and I love suffer. But the only way they wake up is they're going to have to.
How did the Democrats end up here? If you go back to, the first Trump presidency, and the way that it ended with the insurrection, the Capitol 6 riot, Biden gets back in. There's, America's economy grows. All these things, and people were talking about how It's inconceivable that Trump will win the election. We can't. There's no way he's going to win the election. I'm sure. I heard Joel say it as well. And yet,
that was a whole other thing.
Hmm?
That's a whole other thing of how our voting is affected. So remember, we have those two-party system, and it comes down to Republicans are willing to be all of them. It's either you're Republican or you're not. And the Democrats and Liberal Party, we don't care who you are. You can just hang out under our tent. We don't have one direction. We believe that there's multiple ways to get there. And that's the big ideology thing that really affects how we're voting. And the MAGA are very, very, very staunch voters. They show up at everything. And they make up about 45% of the Republican Party at the time. So you had a lot of people who were already figured this election was going to suck, and they chose not to vote. More people in the United States chose not to vote than who voted.
Yeah, okay. So a lot of it, what she's saying there is the Republicans will absolutely refuse to vote for anybody except a Republican, while the Democrats are willing to vote for who they think is best. And the Republicans were very polarized. Were very. What I don't want to say polarized. That's not the right word. We're very motivated to get out and vote, while the Democrats were in power, and not so much. And you didn't have incumbent power this last election cycle. Incumbent power, as in the person that is in office tends to stay in office for 2 terms. You couldn't get that with Biden because of his
age
and his health,
age and how that was pressed
and the propaganda around.
Right. And then it was also difficult for some people to see a woman in power for some reason.
Okay.
It's very hard for women to become leadership positions still.
Okay, let me just play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Trump got more votes. Popular vote, right? He's apparently supposed to on as actual numbers, he had more votes, right? I know the electoral college skews things, but he still won the popular vote. Secondly, there were areas and populations such as Hispanic to an extent, other minority groups, which I can't remember now off the top of my head, but I remember reading some of the analysis for, who ended up voting for Trump rather than voting for the Democrats. Some would say that the most important thing to move forward is to find out the mistakes that were made by the Democrats themselves in the run-up to that election that led to some people who would have generally voted Democrat to vote for Trump. There must be things that could have, like, for example, some people talk about how Biden should have quit the race much earlier, for example. There should have been a proper democratic primary system instead of Kamala just being kind of handed it over. That maybe there was some complacency on the Democratic side that, there's no way that people will vote for Trump. There must have been things that could have been done better.
Yeah.
Well, one of them that could have been done better is the repeal of the Citizens United. The amount of money that was put into our politics, and we have 4 years of it. One, we limit the time period of how long you're allowed to start polling, picketing for your position would be nice. And that you have to be transparent with who's spending money and how they're spending money. You had a lot of people who were putting out a lot of negative misinformation to minorities. You had a lot of misinformation being put out to everybody. In fact, you had people who were saying they were Kamala Harris's, groups, PACs, political action groups, and they had nothing to do with the Democratic or Kamala Harris. They were just saying that they were. And that changed how a lot of people were getting their information, because they're also being beat to death with it everywhere you go. You're driving, your radio, your TV, your TikToks, your Instagram, your Facebook.
That's another very important thing right there. The Republican Party is the social media party, essentially. I mean, the Democratic Party kind of looked down on them specifically because they were doing things for social media likes and attention. What they didn't realize is that a lot of your people that are now of voting age are very much embedded in the social media lifestyle. So a lot of it could have very well come from there. And maybe the Democratic Party that's in power needs to take a look at that and gear themselves more towards what people are interested in today.
How people are receiving information, and then again, making sure we took away some of our laws were taken away by Nixon again about how media had to be truthful. Our media used to have a Fairness Act, and you had to give both sides of the story. You couldn't lean one side or the other if you were saying you were news and you had a news license. Fox News doesn't have a news license. Fox News is an entertainment license. And a lot of people didn't realize that. But that was because they got rid of the Fairness Act during Nixon.
And people don't seem to make the correlation between, fascist dictators and how they operate and Trump's playbook right now.
A lot of Americans don't understand the difference between socialism, Marxism, communism, and they also don't know the difference between a republic or democratic government. And a lot of that is because of how they've changed education since that time period.
Okay.
We don't have a national standard, we have a state standard. Most people in America do not move more than 50 miles from where they were born. They never travel more than 100 miles from where they were born.
Okay, so, again, devil's advocate. Since the 1990s, the majority of US presidents have been Democrat. You had Clinton. Mm-hmm. Yes, you had 8 years of Bush, but then you had 8 years of Obama. You had 4 years of Trump, and then 4 years of Biden. Okay, let's say 50-50. All right, so half the time it's been under the Democrats, half the time it's been under the Republicans. Surely a lot of these things could have been fixed by those Democratic presidents, those Democratic houses. I mean, as you say, midterms often go against the company. Why? What? For example, I mean, Obama had 8 years, right? Why didn't any of that get? I mean, you're mentioning some very valid points, but they're from Nixon and Reagan. Obama was there. Clinton was there.
You have the presidency in the United States does not mean you have the Congress.
Right. Couple things there. One, it is our checks and balances system that kind of keeps things on an even keel, and that's been thrown out the window in the last couple of months. Two, it's the mindset of Republicans and Democrats. Democrats want to work within the system to make the system better. Republicans want to say, to hell with everything, it's my way. We're doing it.
So even though we had 8 years of Bush, he didn't have the trifecta.
He didn't have the House and the Senate backing him.
Or the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was moderate.
Okay, what about Obama's time? Yeah.
Issue. He did not have the Congress, which is our House of Senate and Representatives.
Yeah.
And he did not have the Supreme Court. Trump has ended up with the bullshit that has been played by the Republican Party. He has what's called the trifecta. He has the presidency, he has the courts, and he has the Congress. So it's like one party has all the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and they're the prime minister. And then whatever court system, I'm not sure how your courts are. I can't remember how your courts are situated.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not sure sometimes even our own courts know how they're situated sometimes. But yeah. But yeah, okay, but
you have one party to take all of it.
okay, fine. But I mean, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, right? There's a lot of blaming the other side. Well, they did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. They're not educated. They're not this. They haven't read. They just listen to Fox News. This, that, and the other. It's not exactly a compelling way of getting people over to your side, is it? By shouting at people.
And there's nothing you can do. The thing is you can say, hey, well, what about this or what about that? And you try to be engaging with them. And there is no engaging. They don't want to engage.
Right.
You can only beat yourself up against a brick wall for so long. They refuse to have anything to do with what isn't their core.
When you point out that somebody did something wrong, that, somebody in government.
This idea, and you're not even pointing out that something's wrong. You just ask them a question.
When you point out that somebody did something wrong in government, that they said something or did something illegal, then it becomes a matter of whataboutism. Well, okay, they did that, but what about this other person that did that?
Yeah, I know.
It's like,
whataboutery is the refuge of the idiot. I really do think so, man. And the refuge of the chauvinist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, as I'm saying, how are you going to change hearts and minds?
Oh no.
Two things that would help. The Fairness Act coming back would be great. Which is, if you want to say your news, you actually have to show both sides of the arguments, and you have to show the middle ground. That would help out a lot, because then you can't play one side over the other. 2, as I said, it's gonna have to come down to the FO series. And until something changes for people to realize there's a bigger world than just your neighborhood. There's a bigger world than just your village, your town, your city. These are all different sizes, different names. There's things outside that just because you don't have anything to do with it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means you need to be awake. And the only way that's going to happen is media changing and how we view education.
So do you think that they haven't got a point on anything that they're saying? There's absolutely, all of it is just nonsense and ignorance, and there isn't any kind of substantive issue that does actually need to be addressed.
No, there is problems with our government and excessive spending, and spending in ways that it isn't really helping. That obviously exists.
And I am okay if you want to teach your children through the church that's how life is. That's fine. But my money shouldn't be supporting your church. What if I have different beliefs? That our public education should be very big difference between church and state.
Yep.
So like in Texas right now, the state has put out a new education system, and it's called the Bluebonnet, and it ties heavily into Christianity. And that's how they want education taught.
Yeah, I've never understood how that works, but yeah.
I agree that there are government inefficiencies and that they do probably need to be handled. But the way to handle them isn't to burn everything down and then try and make it more in our own image. It's to actually have oversight and enforce the oversight.
And the same rules should apply to both high and low.
So you mentioned at the beginning that you were worried about the way the country was going and the things that were happening. One of the advantages of the United States is that it's a massive country. I mean, it's 3 time zones. It's for someone who comes from the UK, for example, where it's a tiny country, you get from one end to the other in a couple of hours. It's almost a bit, I can't really kind of compute it. There must be the places like the West Coast, the East Coast are always thought to be more Democrat. California, Maine on the other side, whatever. I mean, the specifics, I might be wrong, but the idea that there are places which are a lot more liberal, a lot more Democrat. is that somewhere you could find yourself moving to, or being forced to move to?
Don't think it would help all that much.
Right now, it wouldn't. If it were not Trump's administration, yeah.
I mean, if we were willing to move out into the middle of nowhere, Montana, and be mountain people or something, then that would be one thing, as long as we could live completely off the grid, essentially. But
You can't even do that.
Okay, so again, as I said, I don't understand, America as well, but I would have thought, because I understand that there's a lot, there's a federal branch of government, and then there's the state branches of government, and each state has its own laws, and the idea is that it was always supposed to be a kind of a confederation of different states. That was otherwise, if I remember from my history reading, you would have ended up with the same problems that led to the American Revolution in the first place. Ruled from a far off place. A lot of autonomy was given to the states. So, and the federal government only goes so far in the things that it does. So why wouldn't I don't know, being in New York, California, other blue states,
think about it more like
be all right?
So the EU is like our federal government.
Okay.
But each state is its own country, its own customs, its own.
that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
So therefore, surely, then that would mean that there would be states where you could go to, and you wouldn't, you'd feel you'd be insulated a little bit from the madness.
Possibly when it comes to local politics, but when it comes to also like international politics, trades, international relations, anything like that, we're still under the purview of the federal government, because individual states don't really handle that type of thing. And
The rule of the thumb for us is what the federal government makes as law, each state needs to be at it, but they can go above it, or they can fight the federal government.
right, the states are supposed to be able to set their own laws. That's why it's still federally illegal to distribute marijuana, but there are states where it's legal. So, but what people don't realize is that the federal government can still come in and enforce federal law on people and arrest them and charge them federally. So, yes, you're still under the purview of the federal government, even if you do go to a place that is more democratic.
Okay, but you've been mentioning about how one of the aims of this administration is to weaken the federal government, right? Burn the whole thing down.
In a way it is, in a way it's not.
It's to weaken the federal government as a whole by concentrating power into one branch of the federal government.
Okay.
The president has more power than anybody else.
Right. Get rid of oversight and make it so that certain people can do whatever the hell they want, and if anybody else blinks at them, then they can be punished.
It's what Trump's. If you look at our time called the Gilded Age, is what Trump is pushing for, where the rich have all the power, they get to make the laws, they own the Congress. Labor has no decisions. They're what we call, disgustingly, we call them robber barons. They steal everybody else's life, and they have unlimited wealth, and they can do whatever they want. That is what Trump and Project 2025 really look for. There would be two classes of people. Either you're a peasant or you're rich enough to afford.
The power that they're trying to get rid of out of the federal government is the ability to help people. Anything that helps.
So can't the states then fill that gap?
Some states could. That's you have some states that have more money than others. So obviously they're going to be able to help their people more than others. That's part of the issues that we have directly with the way that they're getting rid of the education system. The Department of Education, because the Department of Education is designed to take money from everyone and then redistribute it equally among all students so that everyone gets an equal education.
And that everybody has an equal standing as a student.
It's the same idea, but what they're doing is they're making it so the rich keep their money and their kids get educated, and then the poor don't, and their kids stay uneducated. It's the exact same thing across the board with everything else in regards to the distribution of wealth. You're not allowed to make it so that other people can bring themselves up by having opportunities. You're only keeping rich communities rich and poor communities poor.
So, but are there not some states of the United States that on their own would be some of the biggest economies in the world? California
Well,
comes to
yeah.
mind, for example.
Look at, there's two extremes right there. California is very liberal. Texas is very conservative. Both of them, if they were by themselves and not part of the United States, would be in the top 10 trade partners in the world.
Yeah.
Without the United States back them up. And yes, they can do stuff, but again, they are still having to fight in our legal system to do that.
But they're about the only two that could really manage on their own.
They're the only two that have the power through money. The other states do have large amounts of money, and some states don't, and some states do. The more rich states end up being democratic states,
Except Texas.
except for Texas.
Mm-hmm. But
Most
Texas has
of
got a lot
their-
of oil wealth as well, hasn't it? So it's got a lot of.
Yes, Texas has the Gulf of Mexico, and that's a trade port. And then we also have oil.
And Texas is like a third of the size of the U.S. or something.
Yeah. True.
It would take us about 14 hours to drive from one side of Texas to the other.
Yeah, I've heard this. Yeah, I've heard this. Okay.
Texas has a lot of natural resources that are still untapped. But what Texas lacks is water.
Okay, so just going back to the states thing again. Could you find a situation where states start seceding from the union?
They've wanted to.
Well, the only time Texas wanted to secede from the Union was when there was a Democrat in charge.
Yeah. No, but I'm thinking of California is the one that's come to mind.
California, well, the thing is part of the Civil War issue was they can no longer cede.
Yeah, it's
now the only state
union in
that has
perpetuity.
The only state that has the right to break up into more states is the state of Texas.
Well, he's talking about actually seceding from
I know,
the Union.
but that was part of the Civil War, was we could no longer allow seceding without you becoming the enemy of the United States.
And honestly, do you think Trump would give up any
No.
power? I mean,
No, of course not.
He's trying to snatch up Panama, the Panama Canal. He's trying to snatch up Greenland, and
trying to make Canada feel like their 51st state.
Yeah, I mean,
Canada.
And what he does,
there are some
and what
people who are kind of sitting back and watching America lose all of its soft power around the world and going, you know what? This is just the way that empires end.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have
we've already had
overreach.
that thought.
You have overreach and things start going wrong.
Yeah, we all sit around and talk about it.
Yeah, but he's handing it away. He's just giving it away with a big smile on his face and convincing everybody else that it's a great thing.
So do you think that Trump is ideologically bent on this stuff, or is it that he just wants power and he will use whatever things he can? And if for example tomorrow he decides to do something which isn't so insane but something that he wants to do, that he'll just do it?
I think he's a mercenary.
Yes, that's
He's
a good way
very
of putting it. Yeah.
Well, I would actually call him a snake oil salesman.
Mercenary.
Yeah.
Snake oil salesman in our mythology is somebody who sells fake cures.
Yeah. I know.
They're con men.
He makes money at all costs.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, just said a slightly different way. He wants himself to have more money and more power, and he wants his friends to have more money and more power, because that brings him more money and more power and more prestige. So he isn't ideological about anything. He doesn't give a crap about Christianity. He just cares about what Christianity can get him.
Mm-hmm.
So his friends are the people that can get him more.
And
of power and money.
and he's put them in positions where they have the ability to take more power.
I mean, look at what he's done to the stock markets, the U.S. markets, and even your markets.
Oh yeah.
Just he poked them and poked them and poked them and poked them until they fell, and then gave a reprieve, but not until after he talked to all his friends about, put your money in now.
Insider
stuff now.
trading, yeah.
We have actually, there's insider trading
And
investigations where a lot of people who are related to the Trump faction or MAGA sold and bought 10 minutes before he changed his mind.
any other president and his entire cabinet would have been impeached by now for doing exactly what he did.
Yeah.
But the most people in Congress right now who have the ability to impeach are his friends.
So, I mean, is that a grain of comfort that can be taken that, this isn't a monster like Hitler or Stalin? He's just a mercenary.
There are people who can't. No, there are people who will. That's the problem. There is people who will move up to Mussolini. There are people who will move up to Hitler. There are people who are willing to take it as far as Stalin. And they're all around.
If it was an ideology, of his, and he actually felt this way, and it wasn't just, him trying to make himself turn himself into the next Putin, then maybe it would be a little bit more understandable. But
it's around him that should worry.
But he's
so who are the people? I mean, are we talking about Vance? Because Vance is a little shit. Sorry,
but but Vance has a sugar daddy that has a lot of power in our military.
Vance is a bitch.
Vance,
Did I say that out loud?
Yeah.
My bad.
Okay, but it's not Vance that you have to worry about. It's who's supporting Vance.
Whoever has their hand up in that puppet at any given time.
It's Stephen Miller, your project, the Heritage Foundation, which is changing the ideology of our courts. You also have a lot of people he's been putting into positions of our what they call the secretaries.
Mm-hmm.
Those are people that have positions of power within that sphere, and they're the ones that are either taking that power and making like ICE, which is Tim Holman, Stephen Miller, who is acting as his voice in telling everybody what to do. When Trump, you can see that in our Signal Gate bullshit right now. Vance will do whoever is playing him. Same with Elon Musk. Elon Musk has too much money for his own damn good.
Mm-hmm.
But he knows how to use that money to get other people to do what he needs to do. And that's the other problem with our political, when you're picketing for your position. He's willing to throw stupid amounts of money to basically flood an area with misinformation. And he's one of them that was also found to be saying, I'm part of Kamala Harris. And it was his pact, which has nobody has to explain what they're doing or show books. So there's a lot more people around him that you need watching. Trump is pretty easygoing. You can not easygoing, but he's a really easy read.
Yeah.
He's a con man.
You know what he wants.
Yeah.
And Trump wants the Gilded Age because he wants to be that person. He wants to be the robber baron. He wants to be the new Vanderbilt or the Carnegie. And he doesn't care how it comes about. But the people around him that are giving him helping him decide what he needs to be are the ones that you really need to be watching. JD Vance is not one of them. JD Vance is, you need to be watching who's got JD Vance's pocketbook.
Okay. Well,
and that's Peter Thiel.
Yeah. So I'm aware that I've already taken over an hour of your time, so I should probably bring this to a close.
I think we're enjoying the conversation.
Is there anything that gives you hope for the future?
Well, okay, today there was supposed to be a white on black event. There was recently in this local area, there was 2 kids that got in a fight. one of the kids pulled a knife, and he happened to be African American. The kid that started the fight and passed away, sadly, I'm sorry to say that, but he was white.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided they were going to have a march for white on black because they feel that they're a very racist group up there.
Mm-hmm.
And today it was supposed to happen at 11 o'clock. And there was more police presence. There were more police officers there than there were protesters.
Yeah.
There was 6 protesters that showed up. And it was a January 6th defendant or a rioter that was leading it. And there were 6 people, not counting the media, that showed up. Everybody else that wants to see things change is at the hands the Change the World events that are in downtown Dallas or in Collin County. They didn't want to deal with it. And that kind of gave me hope because I think they realize that there's more to this story. We haven't even gone to court yet. They're trying to throw this into the court of public opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That it's white versus black crime. And that only 6 people showed up. You had 20 cops and like 20 media and 6 people. That many people showed up for it made me happy because at the same time, during Trump's first term, you have people flying Nazi flags off the freeway.
What about you, Joe? Is there any glimmers of hope you can see?
The only hope I can really see is the 2026 election, hopefully shifting the House and the Senate and taking away his trifecta.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things I would have thought would be this Supreme Court system that you have, where the president appoints the Supreme Court judges, isn't the best in the world, is it? It can be easily manipulated.
And yes. Mitch McConnell, who was the head of the Senate for the Republicans, he flipped it enough he played games that were legally there, but he tried to make it all about history.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump got to pick, or people behind Trump picked the 3 most conservative that they could get in there, and that's where it changed.
So, because obviously the president isn't going to change for the next 4 years, well, unless he dies. But the Congress might change, and the Supreme Court is unlikely to. So, I'm just wondering, it's still going to be a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always.
Well, I feel like this has been a very depressing show, but I'm trying to find some good out of it.
Well, the whole thing is our Supreme Court, what Trump is doing right now that makes it's reason why a lot of people are watching it. Our Supreme Court gets 8,000 cases a year. They only take about 60 of them, and those are supposed to only be based on our Constitution. But Trump has pushed so many emergency ones saying that they're constitutional issues that the court is really just kind of jumping. And if the court really wants to push back, which they are kind of starting to do, is they would make him go the legal route. If Trump had his way, he would basically make the Supreme Court a check on whatever he wants to do. They are pushing back. We have 3 that can be persuaded to join other justices. But it takes time for them to have arguments and look up the laws, look up history. And it does happen. But by pushing them to do this fast, it means that they're going to go with their gut instinct, which is their firm ideologies. The court is not supposed to be this fast with turning around. The average time it takes to get to the Supreme Court is usually 5 or 6 years.
Okay. So, actually, ironically, the fact that it's so slow might actually work to people's benefit this time around.
It gives time for things to change, people to find the middle ground, and the court to be like, okay, this really isn't an issue for us now. If they don't see that how this is a constitutional issue. Right now, it is because of how Trump is pushing it. He's filing emergency declarations. If it was working, and if they wish to do it, they could force him. And you're starting to see pushback from our judicial that it's going to go the correct route. Yes, it can move in a faster pace, but we're still talking like a year, not.
He wants the government to shut down. He wants to set up martial law. He wants to be a dictator.
Well, let's just hope he has a coronary, eh? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an education for me, as obviously I'm not American. I'm from outside, and I'm looking at it from the outside. It can look. What are those kind of trite sayings that you hear? It only starts getting bright after the darkest part of the night. So maybe sometimes when you're when you finally come face to face with what is happening, you might change your mind. It was all, when it was all theoretical, it was fine. When it's not theoretical and it's happening on your front door, it does focus the mind a little bit.
Well, that's the reason why you see, if you look on Twitter in America, the FAFO movement. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people are hoping starts waking. We need to become more involved in our politics and less compliant. And people are now starting to pay attention because it's affecting them. And as it does, and you can look at our history, it happens a lot, especially for when they destroyed the Gilded Age. And then when we saw the Civil Rights Movement, it's about time historically, and you can look at it and see the pattern.
Yeah,
but I would. You need things to happen in a certain way, or else America could teeter one way or the other.
I would recommend actually for either of you to read some of the work of Ibn Khaldun. He was an Arab political scientist, if you want to call it that way. This is in like the 12th, 13th century. And he looked at all these different empires. He looked at the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire. Obviously, he was at a time when the Arab and Islamic empires were doing quite well. And I read, and so it's it's a very old book. I mean, you can get it online as a PDF, the translation, and it is scary how accurately he delineates the pathways of civilization and the pathways of empires, of how they start off and how they become wealthy, and then what causes their decline and what are the things. And I found a lot of parallels with the British Empire, and I reckon there's be quite a few things that would come there. So if you ever get a chance, something for you to read as well.
Well, how about I give you one in exchange?
Yes, exactly. I was going to ask for exactly the same.
All right. So, have you ever heard of Dr. Heather Cox Richardson?
No.
Okay, she is on both Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky.
Mm-hmm.
And she does a weekly letter, and she's a history professor of American Revolution.
Okay.
And she ties both how things moved in previous American history and how to compare it and what is happening now.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she just delivered last night, because it's our 250th anniversary, she delivered the speech for Paul Revere.
Okay.
So the rise of the Boston Tea Party,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and how we had the regulars and the British, it kind of the rise of American Revolution.
Yeah.
And she was delivering the speech for the 250th anniversary. But every day she offers a newsletter that comes out at like midnight our time.
Mm-hmm.
But every afternoon at 4:00 our time, she has a 1-hour show where she'll answer people's questions. And she has a lot of international people who contact her on the YouTube that ask questions live, so she can explain how American history and what's going on and how to apply it.
Okay, that's on my list of things to do then. I'll put that in. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for both of your time. let us know, folks, what you think. You can always contact me up on the socials. You've got me on my website, Atypical Doctor on Threads and Blue Sky and all that sort of jazz. And I shall see you again in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks a lot, Joe and Jackie. Thanks a lot, guys. That was good. I'm sorry if I depressed everybody, though.
Well, it's something. When you're politically involved, you start noticing these.
Yeah.
And you have opinions, and that's the whole point. And yeah, our opinions are a little slanted towards the left, but we're more of what we're moderates.
Yeah.
Not really, because there's things that we agree with the Democratic Party, especially about strong social nets. But there's things like, I believe that if you're going to own a gun, fine.
Yeah.
But as a Democrat, I think if you're going to own a gun, then get a license.
Yeah, so I think the problem is when people get ideological in one direction, people become ideological, almost like a counter reaction the other way. You know, it's like, and I think, and that's when you lose people in the middle, because there's always, I mean, I remember this as well. I mean, you know, I'm trying to think of a good example now, but I can't think of one now. But basically, you know, the idea that, you know, in order to resist that which you find offensive, you find yourself becoming a mirror image of that, and then you lose the people in between, really, and then those people, as you say, don't vote at all or don't get engaged at all, and so you then vacillate between these two extremes. Do you know what I mean? And it's difficult. It is difficult, especially, you know, if you have firmly held ideas, then, and you see people literally running off a cliff and being happy about it. It's difficult, you know. And sometimes, yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's a case of, you know what, maybe you should suffer a bit, and then maybe you might realize. But hey ho.
We believe that, like, a strong social net is, we believe in universal health care, but we live in America. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
People will take an Uber to a hospital before trying to order an ambulance.
I mean, to be fair, actually, we've got to that stage here as well, but that's mainly because we're so stretched, because there's not enough ambulance drivers, because there's not enough immigrants to become the ambulance drivers, and so therefore it is easier to just get an Uber to go to the hospital. That's what we've got to as well. So, cool. Well, as I said, thank you very much, guys. Thanks for your time, and yeah, thanks a lot. I'll do a bit of editing and get this up in the next couple of days. Ooh, can you hear me? I feel like something's gone wrong here. Hey guys, sorry, I think I lost you there. Hey man, yeah, sorry, just my bloody Linux, yeah, Discord decides to stop working just at the end. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Jackie. Thanks for your time. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll get this out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Give us a link to it when it happens.
Yeah, I will do. Cheers. Thanks a lot, guys.
And send me the name of that person that you wanted us to read, and I'll send you Dr. Heather Cox Richardson.
Yeah, I will do. I probably got it on a PDF, actually. I can just send you the PDF, actually.
All right.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Wow, that was fucking depressing, wasn't it?